Tuned into On the Move. Across South Africa, debates are heating over statues and monuments from the colonial and apartheid eras. Calls for their removal are not new at all. Several removals have already taken place in recent years, and this has also sparked strong reactions from communities on all sides of this conversation. While some of the removals of these symbols as necessary for transformation, others warn that it risks erasing history and attacking cultural identity. But what if we didn't have to choose between remembering the past and reshaping public spaces for the future? That's what we'll be exploring in this hour of the show. Alternatives from relocating statues to museum, adding contextual plaques, commissioning artistic reinterpretations, and many, many more. We're understanding this and discussing it this morning with historian Omar Badsha. Omar, thank you so much for your time and helping us unpack this conversation. Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you very much for having me.
Well, this is an interesting one because the history itself is not all great. In fact, many of it isn't. But the monuments were put there for a reason. So let's unpack that, right? What is the significance of colonial era or apartheid era statues and monuments still existing post-apartheid or post-colonialism?
First and foremost, it shows how magnanimous we are and embracing with, and not just going around knocking down old monuments and statues because we don't like that era. But it's monuments and statues a reminder of a history, and depends on how one approaches history. So it can be something that you might not like, a statue that you might not like, or a building that you might not like, but it is part and parcel of our history.
I see. I mean, doesn't just happen in South Africa. I'm pretty sure all across the African
All over the
continent
world.
and all over the world where things have happened. These monuments and statues exist. But context is very important, right? Because the reason why there's been that heated debate is because some people are saying the context that this statue is here right now is because at that time it signified something that was very painful for those who are native to this particular land. So just keeping them there and not really doing anything about them says that we celebrate the context of this particular monument or statue.
Not really. You reinterpret the event that statue monumentalize, but it can be read differently today. That same monument as when it was first put up. So it depends on how one interprets it, and also the space in which it exists. Because some monuments are removed from their original sites and then put into a museum and so the context changes, but the history remains. And that is the most important thing, that one needs to understand that history. And even if it's a very, very difficult period, one needs to be able to acknowledge it and look at history critically, and not just as a celebration.
I mean, that particular repositioning of a statue that has colonial meanings is probably going to be difficult for many, because its intent was meant to celebrate the colonial figure, right? So how do you reimagine it? Is it keeping it where it is? Is it putting it in a different situation physically? Or is it around destroying it? Because there's an emphasis of destroying these statues. We know that's the call here in South Africa. Because I think that reimagination process is where people are having a hard time, Omar.
Yeah, but by law we are not we are stopped from destroying monuments. We would rather move them but not destroy them, because they're part and parcel of our heritage. and our history, and all it takes is to put a little plaque giving an alternative interpretation of
Okay.
the statue or a building.
And I mean, whose positioning would you then put in interpreting that particular statue? Because everyone has a different interpretation of what something actually means. If something has a heritage of sorts and maybe a historical perspective, right?
Yeah. Now, look, all history is about perspective, it's about interpretation. And, buildings or monuments each one have their own interpretation. And in the present, a lot of these monuments remain in their places, but the titles or the interpretation given to them changes, and that changes the context, but without and it makes people understand that we had a difficult past, and these were the people who played a role in that past, but acknowledging that it is the past, man. Um,
Omar, the reason why the debate actually exists is because, those who are part of maybe, the painful end of that past would be debating against those that say, well, this is part of my culture. I don't see this as a painful past. This, for me, is something that I want to show my children, my children's children, of who our ancestors are. So when you reinterpret that, it feels like there has to be sides that you're taking within the reinterpretation process.
Yes, no, definitely so. Each generation approaches a monument or differently and re-examines it within its own context. And you just saying this was an apartheid area politician in itself, puts context to that statue, or this was a liberation history figure, and straight away you approach that differently, and each generation has its own way of appropriating and remembering the past. Sometimes the statue is taken down, but the history is written somewhere and it's accessible. More so today than ever before because of the technology of the internet and its ability to reach out to people and allow them to make different interpretations of events and statues and people. Yeah.
All right, Omar, let's take a short break. You gave us one of the simplest, interpretations, or one of the simplest ways to explore these alternatives, which is just simply putting a plaque. But I want us to also look at other alternatives, maybe artistic reinterpretations, creating new monuments that celebrate previously overlooked heroes, even that it can be strenuous because we have financial issues in our countries, especially here in South Africa and in the African context. So I want us to look a little bit more at other ways that we can reimagine these figures that still stand within our communities. It's 20 minutes past 9 Central Africa time. We'll continue this conversation with Omar Badsha after this.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine, weekdays 6 till 9.
Malawians go to the polls next week in a high-stakes general election where citizens will choose a new president and 229 members of parliament. And this comes 5 years after the country's 2019 election was annulled by the Constitutional Court due to widespread irregularities in a landmark decision that overturned the victory of the then President Peter Mutharika.
I'm not saying we're a perfect government. No, nobody is. I mean, we've seen even South Africa facing challenges with the fuel that's going up and with whatever challenges. But you know what? When you are dealing with an IMF policy that says do not employ so many people because you are going to become a welfare government and all of that. And Dr. Chakwera said I've got high numbers of unemployment. As a government that is answerable to Malawians, we have found IMF policies wanting on many issues. We believe the people who pay us taxes to put us in our positions, we owe them employment at the minimum.
That's Dr. Jesse Kwabila, who's the Minister of Higher Education in Malawi.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine. Palesa and Benjamin fuel your day with fresh African perspective on Channel Africa.
22 minutes past 9 o'clock Central African time. We're having a Heritage Month conversation today right here on The Move. We're speaking around the debate that's happening in South Africa's parliament, where the EFF's campaign to destroy Afrikaner statues and memorials continue. The EFF chief, Nontando Nolutungu, presented in Parliament this particular position of the EFF. However, the infamous AfriForum says they will oppose the EFF plan to destroy Afrikaner statues. Should these statues be removed because they speak of a very painful past for some, but for others it's a history that is still to be noted. We're speaking on this heritage conversation with our guest today, Omar Badsha, who is a historian. Omar, I'm interested in that idea of the debate itself, right? Because I think the debate speaks of the moment that we are in post-colonial eras, right? Because you have those that still hold dear the images that represent their nationality, their histories, but they also represent their present. I mean, if you think about AfriForum, Afrikanism is kind of something that they hold dear to themselves, and the EFF have like this decolonialization way of seeing politics. How important are those debates as they are maybe speaking of something that feels like it's static, it looks dead when you look at it, it's not moving, but the conversations happening around that particular image are very much in motion?
Yeah, look, we live in an era where no matter what you do, no matter if you go and bomb a city or a country into rubble, like it has happened in Palestine, that history is written all over the world. It exists in people's, memory. It exists in writing. It exists in photographs, and so you can't totally remove that history or bury it. Today, every one of us and every young person has access to the internet and that technology. So you can remove a monument, but what has been written about it, or the person or the event, continues to have its presence in our lives. You just Google something and there's a whole range of information that comes out. It's pro and anti, but it's there.
Omar, maybe that's what we're taking for granted, right? The fact that you're saying that, this information either way is easily available, whether or not you keep the statue or the monument or whether you remove it. But we take for granted that the fact that maybe young people aren't sitting at home Googling about our history and Googling about our past, but they will walk to the shop and see the monument. They will walk to the shop and see the statue on their way to school, on their way to work, on their way to wherever they're going. That is the reminder that says, hey, remember, this exists, even though I'm not going after the information. And that's the thing, right? People don't always readily go after the information, but they will readily see the statue and readily see the monument whenever they pass by it. So what do we do about that particular interaction?
Well, you create alternative platforms for that same information being interpreted differently. And we have that instrument now. So you can have as many statues or buildings that have very, very negative connotations, um, but uh, but are interpreted, visited, and celebrated, depending on who you are and what the environment and the circumstances in which you are now confronting that monument or piece of information. So the notion of monument has been expanded millions of times. You have, say, half a dozen monuments in a city, but now with the new technology, you can put 1,000 biographies of people just from one location, and that in itself becomes a monument to those people and their lives. So, the era in which we live, the notion of monuments continues to change and has different connotations, and it has been expanded. Our website has thousands of biographies of people that most people have not heard of or who have been forgotten. And now when they surf through our website, they come across a person and his or her biography, and it's linked to events, and so our experience is not just one dimensional. As you walk past a statue, there might just be a small plaque, but nothing more. And then you would have to ask somebody or go and do your own research about that person or that event. So, our era has opened us up to new possibilities of presenting history, presenting events and places and their significances.
As we wrap up, should we be cautious in terms of, removing statues that represent a painful past? Because one would say then we could erect something that is more joyful to represent what a nation is. What caution would you give to that? Because I think our pain is also something that needs a form of remembrance, so we don't forget it.
Yes, no, for sure, absolutely, for sure. But you're assuming that our past was just a past of white supremacists, and but our past is also made up of black people who supported them, or who pushed that same agenda.
Sure.
So you can get a Buthelezi, and he's interpreted in different ways by different people.
Sure.
And so that, we are now at a time when we have access to information, positive and negative, but we have access to a lot more, and one can then debate and make up one's own mind about an event or person.
Well, Omar, we have to leave it there. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but thank you for giving us your insights on this one. Omar, you highlighted a website that has some historical collection of biographies. Could you give us where we can go to check it out?
The website is South African History Online.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, it is a wonderful website, actually. And I always make reference to it, even as a journalist. So that's great work that you're doing there, Omar. Thank you for giving us your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
That's Omar Badsha, a historian, giving us a view on this conversation happening here in South Africa.